G'day, and welcome to Mark and Sam After Work. Today I want to do a video on something that I've been avoiding, I suppose, for a fair bit. I've mentioned it in various ways, but basically it's about barrel tuners in reference to harmonics and I suppose to some degree or another why we don't use them and my logic to go with that. The reason I sort of avoid the conversation is it's not something I use. It's a little like suppressors. They're not legal in the state, suppressors, so I don't use them for that reason. There is logical reasons why I use a muzzle brake and would still, even if they were legal, but it would be nice to use suppressors for hunting. But the bigger deal would be the different deal with barrel tuners is I don't use them, not because they're illegal by any means, they're quite able to be used in any form you want. But the limited bit I've used them, I saw results I sort of expected to. And my logic goes with the fact of not using them because of the equipment I do use, but also a little bit of the logic which I made sense of myself. So I want to explain that. What am I talking about? Basically, do barrel tuners make a difference? Yes, of course they make a difference. Anything will change a point of impact through any change in length or in weight or in balance in the barrel can change a point of impact. We see that regularly from just changing one muzzle brake to another muzzle brake, or no muzzle brake to fitting a muzzle brake, or putting a device or an attachment and changing the length of or changing the weight of at the end of the barrel does affect the point of impact. Now, why is that, you'd say? For the people who know, it's obvious, but I'll go through and explain it. The average person would think that a barrel is a dead straight thing with a dead straight hole in it, and when the bullet comes out, it goes to where that hole's pointing. And by and large, you're exactly right. But in the fine details, and that's what we're actually talking about, the actual barrel, when it goes bang, there are harmonics. That shock, there's a shock wave from that cartridge going bang, that creates that large bang is not just sound, it is also a shock wave which actually travels up the steel of the rifle, or all through the rifle, but up the barrel mainly. That's where the chamber is, that's the main point of where that vibration goes. Now that shock wave, that vibration, actually travels at extremely fast speed. It travels as fast as when you hit one, if you touch a piece of steel, you hit at one end, you'll feel at the other end what you think is instant. It takes a bit of time, it has to transfer up the molecules. That shock wave goes up, when it hits one end, then it comes back to the other end, and it bounces backwards and forwards in milliseconds. It actually is traveling very, very rapidly backwards and forwards. What that ends up causing is a wave. There's basically that shock wave transits like a radio wave. It has an up and down motion to it that's going forward and back, up and down as it does this sort of thing, causing the barrel to do exactly that thing where it actually moves. Now here's the thing, this is in very fine detail, very, 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 very small movements. But as you can imagine, if the end of your barrel is moving by as little as 1 thou at 100 yards even, you're going to see a few millimeters of difference, or a quarter inch of difference sort of thing. So with that vibration being the main thing about that vibration up and down, it's happening, it's moving up and down, but it also happens completely consistently. Well, moderately consistently. When it goes bang, that vibration is happening at a certain point. And if you take that vibration and if you've got it moving, when the bullet exits, if the barrel is moving a lot, then a slight change in that movement makes a big change in the point of impact. If you take it to where the barrel's just gone up and sitting there before it comes back down, or just gone down and sitting there just as the bullet releases, then a little variance in the timing of that bullet doesn't make too much difference to the variance in where your bullet lands. That's the basic logic of all these things. That's actually talking about the harmonic shockwave and the harmonics of your barrel, and trying to time it so that when the barrel is at its stillest is when the bullet is released. And it has the least movement over a period of time. So if you talk, now getting a little complicated, but with slight different speeds of your bullet, there's slight difference in where it comes out through where it exits the barrel. And at that point is where we're talking about trying to, in all forms, whether that's, now this comes into barrel tuners, this comes into seating depth, this comes into load development, this comes into all things of where what they're actually trying to do, and the whole logic here is get the bullet to release. Whether the barrel, generally it's when it's right sitting at the top is what people would talk about, when it's sitting right at the top of that movement. So as it goes up, before it comes down, in that little sweet spot there, just before it comes up or just after it comes up, if you can get to that spot there, then that's the least movement. So that's the logic we're working with. In seating depth, you're changing the timing of things. In your load development, you're changing the speed of things. In your barrel tuner, you're changing where that movement is because it is actually changing the weight. Ultimately, it's to do with length as well as what you're talking about here, but it changes to where you get that point to that little sweet spot, which is what we're dealing with. So that sort of makes perfect sense, and that's what most people work with as barrel tuners, as whether seating depths or all the bits and pieces, as that what they're doing, that's what they're looking for, trying to time that. There's also where there's specific lengths in barrels that they use in competition. They found that the node worked best with this sort of load if you have this length barrel, because you change your length, you change this movement, and that times for better things as well. So that's that logic. I suppose, why don't I use it? I don't use it because I am doing things, I'm trying to absorb the vibrations. I tend to run heavier barrels, not heavier than target, but I tend to run heavier than normal varmint barrels. I have a decent sized muzzle brake on there, but it's also a big port muzzle brake. And a bit of my logic with how I set up the rifle, with how I shoot the rifle, with the type of muzzle brake I build, a bit of the logic is that I'm trying to dampen that vibration. So simply make less of that same movement is my logic to go with it. But I suppose that's just what I do. It's always worked, and that's the other excuse I've got. What I do works fine, so why change it? Don't fix what ain't broke is another side of my logic. But in the engineer in me, and I'm a mechanic, not an engineer, but I have been engineering for many, many years, knows that harmonic, that whole vibration, if we come back to the beginning of this, if you come right back to actually talking about that shock wave traveling up and down the barrel, it's about the shock transferring from molecule to molecule in the steel. So that's actually the timing that's involved in here. It's all super high speed, but if you can imagine a tube full of ball bearings, you push on this barrel bearing, that comes out there, but it only gets there by touching all the bearings in between to get to the other end. That's how steel works. It's exactly the same. It has to push through the molecules of the steel to get to the other side. And here's the deal. That timing will be relevant to the temperature and changes quite monstrously from cold to hot. So there is a logic of whether it's your cold bore or whether it's even a hot day, changes the timing of things. So you get in an average position where you've got average temperature and an average day and you've done an average amount of shots, then okay, there is a point you're going to get back to. If that changes by 5 degrees, that changes the timing of things. So I have a fundamental issue with anything that is temperature sensitive, and the nature of timing to a shock wave in steel is extremely temperature sensitive in an engineering side of this. Now, and I suppose before I go down the road of stepping on barrel tuners and that sort of stuff any more than I already have, then my logic is the value of barrel tuners, which I think they do have value. I think seating depth has value. I think the length of your barrel, the overall length of the barrel, the type of system running, all those bits and pieces have value, but it's a different value than what most people are talking about. What I think it has value in has value in confidence, and that is one of the not spoken about but massively important things. It is the nature of whether you believe the target or you believe the bullet or you believe in your firearm or you believe all that sort of stuff. It's actually talking about the same thing. It's talking about confidence. If you can get to the point where you are confident of what you're doing, then everything in your body works better. Then your follow through, your form, you can feel what your rifle's doing, you can walk into that competition with more confidence. And then if that's a barrel tuner that does it, and then you've got the setting, and you've got this setting and this setting, you go in, then that is confidence, and that is extremely valuable. Now this comes for the people who don't do that. They do other things as well, whether it's their load development, the time they spend in their load development side of things, whether it's the the maths they put into how long they want the barrel to be. I put effort into the setup of my rifle. Is where I put my effort into, and my confidence comes from doing a lot of it, but that is also the nature of the other bit that brings confidence, is trigger time. Lots of trigger time. And I suppose my other avenue to doing things is I don't mess around losing my confidence trying to do 100-yard grips and trying to get the perfect ESs and wearing out barrels trying to find my confidence. I go out in the paddock and do what I do with Sam. So we go out and shoot steel at long ranges. We make it happen. We don't always have the perfect day. There's always, we have always extreme, well, not extreme, we have always conditions to blame things on. So I suppose we can hide behind that fence if we want to. But truth it comes out of doing it. And that's my way of doing things. It doesn't leave itself to the, even our world doesn't lend itself to using something like a barrel tuner or doing low development, all the rest of it. But I would come to, like I said, I have a fundamental issue with it, but only in the engineering side of it, in the confidence side of it, in the what works for you, in the what works for the world champion or the club champion or the whoever it is, and they do that and you want to do it, that gives you confidence and that helps you shoot. That is as important as good brass, as a good scope. The confidence, it has to come from somewhere, and that's the real key. That's what I really think about it. So I suppose I would come back to, for me, the likes of barrel tuning, the likes of those sort of things don't work for me. They're not something that I have found the need for or I have the desire to pursue. It works for you, then, you know, all power to you. It's very good, and as that sort of thing, that is something that really does give some people control, and that helps them. I would start to test further, and I could think that I'd come to a place where I'd say, okay, I can get to the same place without that, but if that works for you, then, you know, go for it. Anyway, that's my comment on that one there. I'm not trying to piss anyone off or poo-poo people and their products, all that sort of stuff. There is logic to all this sort of stuff. It's just not my way of doing it. Thank you for listening to me. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for checking in. We'll catch you next time.